Hi everyone, welcome to MezFi Meets. I'm Jerome, the CEO of MezFi. MezFi is a tokenization platform that is looking to bring mezzanine finance on chain and allowing access to everyday investors for mezzanine finance opportunities. I'm here today with Mitchell Travers from Soulbis and a number of other esteemed pieces of work. And today we're going to be discussing things like tokenization, some of his recent work with BGIN, the Blockchain Governance Initiative Network, as well as a few things that are happening in the world of tokenization. So Mitch, you can intro yourself further than that if you'd like. Otherwise, we can get going.
Well, yeah, a pleasure to be here. So thanks for inviting me to MezFi Meets. It's been a pleasure working with you so far as well. So I guess, yeah, Mitchell, I've been in crypto space for a little while now, around 8 years, worked on a decentralized identity product, an exchange product, and now I'm doing research and consulting around on-chain credentials and privacy and attestations and these sorts of things. So that's why Soulbound tokens is really important, and the name of the business is Soulbis after that. And of course, in the public goods space, as Jerome mentioned, I'm working on a global think tank called BGIN, or Blockchain Governance Initiative Network, where I'm the chair, the co-chair of the Identity, Key Management and Privacy Working Group. And we do a whole bunch of different works in terms of documentation on research in accountable wallet work, zero knowledge proofs, and now more recently actually illicit finance and using AI. And then the network as a whole really focuses on governance and different sort of multi-stakeholder blockchain conversations, and hosts different events throughout the year. So yeah, that's a little bit about me, but let's go.
Look, you talk about Blockchain Governance Initiative Network. I mentioned to you that I was really interested to hear about your experience recently there. Obviously, I was in Japan too for it. So why don't you start with Block 10, Begin Block 10, and maybe shed some light on the kinds of things that we were discussing there. The reason for its existence, perhaps, and what you're hoping, or what the initiative is hoping to achieve out of the working groups and everything that you guys do.
Yeah, that'd be great. And it's probably one of the best style of conferences I've ever attended in my life. So
Yeah,
just
I can
to give
attest
it
to that. Absolutely,
like a
it was
little bit
great.
of a wrap before I get going, but
Yeah.
yeah. So the block meetings, there's been 10, so that's why we name it Block 10, and it was hosted in Tokyo earlier this year, so like about a month ago. And what we do is we focus on two types of conversation. One is like a roundtable conversation on a particular topic, and the other is a workshop. And the workshop is very much, I think, why Begin has such a sort of a good reputation for those who attend it, because different to the way that many other conferences work, we are able to actually get into the meat of the conversation of very important topics that the industry is always grappling with, but only ever gets to the surface level when you get half an hour panel conversations at different conferences. So the workshops are around like a 2 hour conversation round table with main discussants, but anyone in the room is able to speak. And I guess, yeah, why it's like me enjoy it so much is because there's different like there's a lot of diversity in the room, right? So you've got different practitioners. You have your regulators, you have your sort of entrepreneurs such as myself who are like trying to grapple with technology and see which parts fit where, and then you have the cypherpunks, so the engineers like working on the code and trying to explain this new cool cryptography technique that they think is going to change the world, but is really, really difficult to sort of translate to the different
Yeah,
layers and conversations. So
for sure.
I guess in other words, it represents like civil society in the blockchain space, and that's what it's trying to do, is like have that sort of really in-depth multi-stakeholder conversation about the important things that are happening and where the movement and the technology is going. But yeah, that's
Cool. Yeah. No. Like I said, I I attended it, and you very kindly invited me to be a discussant in the tokenization
Yeah.
workshop. So I found that endlessly interesting, and I contributed what little I could in a room of extremely intelligent people, discussing what are very complex, like you correctly stated, concepts, I guess. And you and I both, being in the world of blockchain and crypto, you longer than me. Actually, I mean, maybe in a bit we can talk about your, the way that you got into this. I mean, I know you've done way more than me. You started an exchange and all sorts of stuff. Maybe we'll leave that for a bit later. But yeah, so I mean, how did you first come to get involved with the BGIN network? Someone from Sydney in Australia,
Yeah, it's actually a good
a
question,
Japanese initiative like this. How did you come across the initiative?
Yeah, so I guess like it's a good origin story as well. How I found my way to BGIN, which kind of has this sentimental value that I hold with it as an organization, which keeps me coming back and contributing, because it is mostly volunteer-based work. But so when we started Soulbis, we were like, okay, this Soulbound token thing, this on-chain attestation, trust is broken in the ecosystem. FTX happened. No one can trust anyone except everyone's anonymous, synonymous on chain.
Yeah,
So how are we going to fix this in order to allow for more institutional-based funds to actually trust the sort of systems that we're building up in this new
for
economy,
sure.
right? And
Yeah.
Soulbound tokens was the focus of Joey and I, my co-founder of research, and we hosted a similar. So it was like a similar style of conference. It's called an unconference with Radical Exchange, which is another like political economy, which civil society group,
Mm-hmm.
that's sort of hosting an unconference where you can turn up and the agenda is set on the day. And Joey and I were like, okay, we're going to put a Soulbound token in the agenda. So we hosted 2 workshops on Soulbound tokens, and that's how we actually met Mishi, who was writing the paper, Soulbound token study report 2, because she was researching at the same time, and she was writing a paper for BGIN on this
Mm-hmm.
topic, and we just found confluence in values and thoughts, and then one thing sort of led to another of us turning up to the working group for BGIN, who was discussing the Soulbound token paper that Mishu was working on, and providing value in the working groups, which are hosted every 2 weeks. And this is what I do as a co-chair now, is
Mm-hmm.
every 2 weeks host a IKP working group on a particular subject usually,
And
but
this is
also,
sorry, and this is all online. You're talking about this was not
yeah,
IRL at all. Yeah, okay, I
yeah, this
understand.
is all online. So the unconference was online, and then um, we joined the working group meetings, which are 1 hour every 2 weeks. Um, and that working group meeting focus was on the Soulbound token paper for a good month. So we joined each one. And after that, we started contributing to the paper. So this is sort of the pipeline of contribution to BGIN, or your typical one. We contributed to the paper, and then when the paper got to a point where it was ready to open it up to the public and the wider audience, we then did so and did a presentation at Block 7 in Vancouver. And that was the first block we attended. And then afterwards, Block 8 was in Croatia, where we did another presentation on the Soulbound token paper. And at Block 8, I was nominated as co-chair of the IKP working group, given the contributions that we were making to the organization, and just the feel and how the path was going. So yeah, now we're at the stage where we're organizing Block 11, and off the back of all of the great work that's been produced up until now to Block 10.
That's awesome. And I guess for anyone that's listening, where will Block 11 be held?
Well, we're actually in the to be decided stage of that still. So
Okay.
I'll make an announcement very very soon. It's actually one of the emails I replied to earlier today. So we'll have that news pending.
very exciting. And like I said, so I attended Block 10. I was there for 1 day of Block 10 as part of the Japan FinTech Festival, which was great. Obviously, we both went there and had a great time between FinSum and BGIN and the DeFi retreat. It was all a great week. And then obviously you and Joey, Mitch's partner, as he said in Soulbis, you guys actually organised Block 9 in Sydney last year, which I attended as well, which was amazing. During was it South by Southwest week? Was that what it was, or was it a different time?
So it was before the blockchain APAC, so the
that's what it was. Yes,
Digital Asset Week.
That's right. Right. Yeah, and so that was a few days and really interesting too.
Yeah. It is good the way that as like kind of like a civil society and more standards documentation think tank organization, it's good to attach itself to the other events in different jurisdictions, obviously with the right alignment, because I see it as kind of like these are the conversations that equipped you for the more like trade show sale style events that are always going on, like Token 2049 in Dubai and those sorts of things that are happening at the moment. I don't know, I get more kicks out of the workshop style conversations and sort of developing the research that we'll see in 3-4 years.
Yeah, totally get it. So so I guess one thing that I mentioned to you before this conversation, was that yesterday I'd been at a presentation from Piper Alderman, Tokeny, and Silk, and they'd been discussing digital identity. So you obviously we haven't discussed it before. So Tokeny are basically building a platform to integrate KYC, AML, all of these kinds of things into the one platform, the tokenization platform. And I asked him about that, and he was saying that when they do off-chain KYC, AML, and then on-chain they give these people some kind of a thing. He wasn't too forthcoming about what it was. That then proves their identity, and in future they don't have to do KYC or AML or anything like this. And I thought to myself, this sounds like Soulbound tokens. So I asked him. I said, so what are you? What is the way that you're doing this? How are you attesting, or is there a body that's that attests for these people? Are you just doing it? Is there a standardized way that you're following? Is there a group that you're whatever? And what is it? Are they tokens, or how do you do that? And so he said it's at the moment it's like a mixture. There's no standard for how they're doing it. There's like a mixture of 721 tokens and other tokens that they send to their wallet. The way that they do it is they're not soulbound in the sense that you as the attester can move them. So the Tokeny or the provider or the financial services provider who has given these attributions of yes, this person has passed KYC, etc., can force move those attestations to a different wallet. So if they lose that wallet, then you can actually move it over. You can force transfer those tokens, but for all intents and purposes, they were effectively soulbound tokens. And I thought that was really interesting. And so maybe I guess one of the most interesting things that we've discussed is identity, soulbound tokens, all of these sorts of things. So maybe for a second, I mean, you can talk about soulbound tokens and how they can apply to these kinds of applications, and what else soulbound tokens will be really good use cases for.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I actually, like, as an upfront statement, I don't think on-chain tokenization is possible without an element of sort of non-transferable value being around. Like I think that Tokeny and the use case that Tokeny is using a lot of off-chain elements like the AML, the KYC, which then gets you wrapped up in what I would assume is a hash or a proof, which then is
Yes,
represented
exactly.
on-chain. And I think that that's like a really elegant and brilliant way, but until we get full sort of on-chain attestations following the same standards and these sort of privacy practices, it's going to be really siloed. Yeah, so I think like the interesting thing about the tokenization wave, I guess we're seeing in the market at the moment, is that when people look at cryptocurrency and sort of the digital asset market, they see all of this like potential to unlock liquidity, to sort of have a borderless based model for transactions, and all of these benefits that these decentralized networks provide, right? But when it actually comes to providing like real financial services, particularly like credit, debt, and mezzanine finance in particular, like these systems actually have processes in the real world of which need to be transformed or morphed in order to fit into the sort of blockchain ecosystem and data standards. And in my opinion, the only way to do that is to have tokenization, but not of the capital based kind, alongside tokenization with the capital based kind. So, like, to date, everything in a blockchain ecosystem, to an extent, until Soulbound tokens really became like a model that people started using, was like transferable value. That's why we had these like NFT profile picture sort of waves of value. We have like ERC20s being launched all over the place as meme coins now. This is all like real like value being transferred, and that's the beautiful thing about blockchain is like that whole read write own thing, right? Like it's value that you can own. However, when we talk about like what actually informs value and what gives you the ability to transfer that for more complex assets, you need additional data points to be involved. And it's those
Yeah.
additional data points and those verifications and those checks and balances and compliance, which is like a really big problem because a blockchain doesn't care about any of that like at all, right? It's just a agnostic sort of database system that uses cryptography in order and distributed computing in order to solve these like age-old human problems of like memory, immutability, history, and like the double entry, triple entry accounting problem, right? So it
Yeah.
doesn't care about like does this person have the right amount of money in order to trade? Are they a wholesale investor? Is this person like from XYZ? Are they able to trade on this tokenization platform? Are they a US investor? Like it doesn't know any of these things, but it needs to learn these things.
Yeah.
And the only way that you're able to work with the blockchain is like tokens, right? Like adding data to smart contracts, which creates tokens, which creates like hashes, which is all information that it can read later. So I think that they come one in the same, and that's what a lot of these tokenization platforms are going to realize is that at the end of the day, like 80% of the tokens that they'll be minting are not going to actually have like real world value and large transaction volume and receive fees from Uniswap automated market makers. It will be a registry on chain of the people and the wallets that are able to act within the Uniswap tokenization pool or whatever pool that they create.
Whatever pool it is. Yeah.
Exactly, on whatever chain, on whatever tokenization platform. Um, like, and there'll be like a different, like there'll be a plethora of these different sort of levels and standards of attestations which exist in wallets. Across different wallets as well, like with account abstraction. So you'll have, like I see a world where I'll have a wallet which is like my bureaucratic identity that like knows that I'm a wholesale investor. My accountant like issues a token to it to say that like yeah he can trade X amount, and this is the business that he's trading on behalf or whatever that token represents behind like a zero knowledge proof or a hash on chain. So yeah, I guess like this is a really good question to ask Mr. Tokeny because they should be thinking about that. I would be interested to follow up with that question of like at what points, like where are the edges of the on-chain, off-chain, and where do they care most about creating those on-chain things? Because I think Tokeny it's a fantastic platform for sort of launching tokens and these sorts of things. But when you have a launch pad in a way of lots of different tokens, each token's going to have its own standards that it needs to, and different jurisdictions. If we're talking about security-based tokens,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Well, in this case, they are for sure.
Yeah. So, so yeah, that's going to be an interesting problem for them to grapple with, is whether or not they focus on trying to be a standard, or they focus on trying to allow for multiple different types of standards to exist on the one marketplace.
Yeah. So speaking of standards, the other question that I asked him was surrounding, they were talking about, and I can't remember the exact number, which is terrible of me. So I think it was ERC 3473, something like that. But basically, so Tokeny have piloted and then had agreed by the Ethereum community. And to me, it was interesting. I didn't know how relevant it was, but basically, this is like has been agreed by the Ethereum community as being the security token, compliant security token standard. Basically.
Interesting.
Which was very interesting. So my question to him, because he said, my question to him was, why do we need a security token standard? Because during his speech, it was about how ERC20s are no good for these kinds of things, because people worry that they can just be bought and sold by anyone, and I sort of put my hand up and I said, that's all well and good and true, but that's only for a standard smart contract. You can build custom smart contracts to only allow KYC'd actors to interact with them. Why do we need a token standard for that? And I think one thing that he said, because I think he was at the beginning, it was a mostly Web 2 normie audience, and so when I asked the question, he said, so the thing about having a token standard is that with smart contracts they usually whitelist wallet addresses, but our standard actually whitelists, and then he went on to describe the digital identity piece. So it seems to me that their token standard, and I should probably look it up so that I can actually be accurate, Tokeny compliant standard. Let me have a quick look here. ERC, let's see what it is. ERC 3643. It is 3643.
I'll check that out. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and quite big that it was that's been accepted by the Ethereum community as a standard for compliant tokens. And yeah, so anyway, it was a very interesting discussion yesterday. And obviously, like I said,
that's part of the race, right?
Yeah,
it's for
absolutely.
that standard to now have adoption.
Yes, this is
as many security token platforms as possible.
So I think they have something like 20 or 30 worldwide partners who are pushing for the adoption and tokenizing with this. They've tokenized something along the lines of $26 billion worth of RWAs already, and yeah, so that's quite big already, and then they're working alongside so they're working alongside some really big guys, BlackRock among them, in terms of tokenizing stuff. So obviously small fish for MezFi to compete with, of course. But yeah, so and speaking of tokenization, I mean, we discussed the other day that Tether is releasing a tokenization platform, which is pretty big news. I mean, what do you know about it so far? Because I just had a quick look into the article about it, but have you done a bit of a deep dive on the way that they're approaching it?
Yeah, so it was like an announcement a couple of days ago from Paolo, the CTO of Tether. It was a little bit of a hype announcement, in my opinion, saying that a tokenization platform is coming. I would say that if I was in Tether's shoes, I would probably have been developing a tokenization platform for many years, just based on their product being the stablecoin. And the next step of a stablecoin is like to lock other assets in order to issue more stablecoin. So it's
For
really
sure.
interesting progression on the Tether sort of product suite. I think that it's probably going to lock more value into that ecosystem, which is net net most likely a good thing for
Yeah,
the sort of digital economy as a whole, because we have more like stable value in the ecosystem for liquidity events. But I think one thing that I find really interesting about Tether's approach is that they've launched like a securities company in El Salvador,
okay.
and in order to facilitate this tokenization platform. Yeah, so that's like, to me, the interesting part is that it really like it look like from the outside it looks and smells like a Bitcoin tokenization platform, which
Mm.
is very much aligned to like a current meme in the market is this like Bitcoin layer twos,
Mm.
and using the Bitcoin blockchain to actually lock value as opposed to like Ethereum and there's going to be this like I would say battle between the two, and there's
Yeah,
obvious trade-offs like the smart contract functionality on Ethereum is like way higher, and the developer
yeah,
community works really hard to build things
for sure.
like EIP 3643. However,
Is
when it
Is
comes to
Stacks
Bitcoin,
one of
there's
those?
like, yeah, Stacks is
Sorry,
one of those.
yeah, Stacks is one of the because I was talking to I think it's Gordon Christian, I think is his name, the other day from Stacks, and he was telling me about the developer sort of movement that's happening with Stacks at the moment on building on Bitcoin, and it is obviously, yeah, this is a big
Yeah,
thing, but yeah, there are definitely as you were rightly pointing out, drawbacks to building on Bitcoin in terms of flexibility and everything else.
yeah,
I mean, yeah,
yeah. It's more difficult to sort of build, but you get more security assurances from Bitcoin because it's just like the total market cap's the highest. The difference between proof of stake and proof of work should not be understated. I know that like we need both in this ecosystem purposefully, and they're both going to be optimized to different reasons. But I would be interested to see if different types of security tokens exist on Bitcoin, layer twos and inscriptions, because of the proof of work element. Like, are infrastructure projects more likely to lock value on Bitcoin than and financial services projects to lock money on Ethereum, because Ethereum is more customizable to like unique contracts, whereas infrastructure is just like energy equals X output. So, like, I think that that's going to be fascinating to follow when it comes to the tokenization side, is like blockchains being optimized for different markets. Because yeah, I'm a believer, and I have been for ages, that like most things are going to be represented as some form of token in some distributed ledger, whether or not it's a public ledger or private ledger, or that token is protected with zero knowledge technology is another question altogether. But I think that it just makes sense, in my opinion, like to have data existing in that way rather than in these like silos that we've got today.
yeah,
Um,
that's really cool. I mean, God,
yeah, it's fascinating.
there's a lot to unpack from what you just said, and a lot of questions that have come into my mind.
Yeah,
I'll just ask you two of them. So the first one is that you made a statement which I don't know if it's surprising, but it's interesting, and there's obviously a lot that you're thinking behind there. So you said we obviously need proof of work and proof of stake. Um, so at the
yeah,
moment, to my knowledge, I mean, there's not a lot of proof of work blockchains left. I mean, obviously Ethereum famously
yeah,
merged and went to proof of stake. apart from Bitcoin, I mean, what other blockchains are there that continue to use proof of work, and why do you think that's important?
Well, yeah, there's the sort of the Bitcoin derivatives like Litecoin. There's like the other ones. Well, Monero is a little bit different, but there are other sort of AI-based blockchains that use computation and like proof of work-based algorithms. And then, of course, there's the whole DAG space as well, like the cyclic graph, distributed cyclic graph DAGs, which is like Phantom and
oh, okay, yes, of course.
yeah. So Hedera, Algorand, and Phantom are like the DAGs, which they often just get bundled in blockchain, but they're actually like a little bit different.
I had the.
I think that they use proof of stake mechanisms mostly. So I agree with you. Proof of work is a dying breed, but I think like the importance of having at least one proof of work chain is like essential to humanity, in my opinion, which is why Bitcoin's important, because it's the only thing that measures, like, incentivizes the measurement of computation, the cost of energy, and like the confidence society has in its base value and money. So it's this like beautiful combination between like the laws of nature and thermodynamics, our growth as society and confidence, and like being able to store value in time, which is what money is, right? Like capital, it's like just the ability to spend it later. It's like a societal debt to spend later, right? So the fact that we're able to actually tie that to thermodynamics and like computation, given the way that the society is going with AI, and like I think I see the price of Bitcoin mining to be a base currency, like a base currency in of itself. Like this is like I will mine Bitcoin at this point. If I get a contract to mine some sort of AI base, like with my computational power instead, which is higher than the lowest hanging fruit, which is just to mine Bitcoin, which is the conversion of my stored energy into stored value, which is time, then I'll do the AI contract, right? And I'll like solve all these AI programs and algorithms and like make money that way, which will then be paid in some like either shitcoin or like ETH. Right?
Yeah, well, that's really interesting. I find it super interesting because I've never thought about mining Bitcoin in those kinds of terms. But it makes a lot of sense, and I guess after having this conversation, because I'd never really thought about Bitcoin in those terms and proof of work in those terms, and I never really, and I guess I'm not ideologically tied to Bitcoin. You know, I'm no cypherpunk, and you know, I haven't really come to crypto in that sort of way. But from that perspective, it makes a lot of sense as to why proof of work is very important.
Yeah, I think it like, yeah, it has to exist. I think that how many have to exist is another question altogether. And I think, yeah, we need both in order to run both experiments at once, because if we don't, then falling in one path is like too risky.
So in some ways, you know, Bitcoin, I having this conversation has actually enlightened me a bit as to why some people, and the people who, you know, I guess if you want to call it, you know, Bitcoin maxis, or, you know, people who came into the crypto world, you know, from you know, money and the government are evil, and OGs, and, you know, from that perspective, I can see why, you know, a lot of people still just hold Bitcoin, because, you know, Ethereum, especially since the merge, you know, is a bit more reflective, I guess, of the world the way that it always was, which is where the people who have the most money control the, you know, the movement of things and the validation of things, whereas Bitcoin is just, you know, it's pure in that sense. Although there are some people who talk about how, you know, Bitcoin isn't even the original, you know, blockchain anymore, and BSV and all this sort of stuff. But we won't go into that. No. Cool, man. Very, very cool.
I think that's part of like the immunity of Bitcoin. But yeah, no, I think that that's a good reflection to have, Jerome, is that like what gets people into blockchain is typically philosophical values on one particular point. Like if it's just speculation on making money, then that is the value that they get, then they'll be there for that reason and they'll exit for that
Yeah,
reason. But the people
yeah,
who originally came to Bitcoin, it was this like, I actually don't trust the value that is like left in the government and these sorts of systems, so I want to be able to store it somewhere else and have this like financial sovereignty. And that naturally leads to like having these sort of principles embedded in the ecosystem, which I think are important to stay, like that sort of store of value over time, Austrian economic perspective on money. And when you were talking, I was also thinking that like it's almost like Bitcoin is trying to solve like one problem really, really well, and Ethereum is trying to actually allow people to solve complexity with a shared like computer system.
yes,
So like Bitcoin's trying
yes,
to
very much.
like have value over time, whereas Ethereum's like, hey, this world is crazy and there's all these things happening all of the time. So what if we can build some sort of system that stores all that information over time immutably, so then we can manage as like a colony better. And that's why proof of stake makes more sense, right?
Yeah.
Because then there are like larger sort of bastions of those systems. Yeah, this has been a really fun conversation. It's not too much related to tokenization. However, I think it's one thing that's super important for people to understand is that those are the trade-offs you're going to be grappling with when you're choosing where to put your whatever token where.
Yeah,
Like, I would
for
imagine
sure.
MezFi would be managing like that sort of go-to-market strategy around like, do we launch on only ETH? Do we launch on ETH, X, Y, and Z? Which layer twos we go to? Allow for like compatibility to? And I think Bitcoin should be part of that conversation as well for MezFi, and that's yeah, should be interesting to see what people
Yeah,
choose and whether or not there's like different institutions that are going to be like, no, we're Bitcoin only, or no, we're Ethereum only, or um, whether all that matters is where the liquidity is at the time.
yeah. Well, I mean, we're platform agnostic, obviously. You know, launching on ETH is a decision that I came to mostly because of our decision to tokenize with NFTs, with ERC-721 tokens, and Ethereum being the place where there's the most amount of value in NFTs, and so the largest audience
Yeah,
for that being on Ethereum. Obviously, as well, smart contracts are the most malleable and programmable on ETH, being the OG chain to put smart contracts on. Definitely in the future we'll look at layer twos, and I don't see any reason that we wouldn't move to Bitcoin. I've talked to people about the notion of launching on Bitcoin and allowing for investment on the Bitcoin network as well. Obviously, like we discussed, Bitcoin lends itself less to these kinds of TradFi, what shall we call them? Forays into the crypto world. I think that's just my view.
yeah,
ETH being like you correctly said, sort of a system that exists as sort of a Swiss Army knife to help humanity
yeah,
tackle complex problems. It makes sense that Ethereum is the tokenization, or the first anyway, tokenization platform, because it exists less as an ideological platform and more as a tool for humanity. But that being said, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't jump into Bitcoin as well, if we can. So that's part of our plans for sure. But you start small, and our first fund is launching soon, and it will be on ETH, and after that, sky's the limit. Who knows where we'll go from there? But it's definitely going to be an exciting ride, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So
When's
yeah,
the
when's the launch? So we
yeah.
don't have a firm date just yet. However, we are we've signed now with our RE, which is exciting, and so we'll be working through all
That's
of
great.
that with them and getting to the launch date. I'm hoping later this month, but most likely it'll be next month. Things don't never move as quickly as you hope they do, unfortunately. Cool, man. Well, look, I'd love to keep chatting for hours and hours and hours and hours, to be honest with you.
We
But
can.
maybe we'll wrap it up there. I really appreciate you coming on and having a quick chat with me about yourself, your background. I mean, Mitch, obviously, if anyone's listening to this, Mitch is a great mind. He's a super interesting person, as you've seen, obviously. And, jump into BGIN, have a look at the Blockchain Governance Initiative Network. It's a really interesting and an eye-opening place. As far as our work goes, I've really appreciated, the work that you've done with Soulbis to help MezFi get to where it is today. So thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. Well, thanks, Mitch, so much for coming on today. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat about, BGIN, Soulbis. We didn't actually get to your origin story in crypto, unfortunately. So maybe we'll save that for next time. Yeah, exactly. But anyone who wants to look up Mitch and what he does, the BGIN network is really interesting, that he co-chairs, as he said. Have a look at it, get into it, look it up online. You can be a part of the workshops and the everything that goes on there. And Soulbis is really great, and thank you so much for to you and Joey for all the work you've done so far. In helping MezFi get to where we are. I'm really excited to continue our work together, and thank you so much for everything so far and for your friendship too, because we've really over the last year or so gotten to know each other well, and it's really great to be able to work through all this stuff together and explore what's a really interesting world in tokenization and everything else that we discuss and get into.
Yeah, solving real problems. That's what we're all about, Jerome. So I've really enjoyed it
That's
too,
it.
and thanks so much for having me to MezFi Meets. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, thanks so much. And if anyone here wants to know more about MezFi, you can go to www.mezfi.com and have a look. We'll be launching soon, as we said. And coming up next time on MezFi Meets, we'll be meeting with one of our directors, a banker of 40 years, he's very interesting, exciting character. I've totally forgotten his name right now, so I'll have to say what his name is in a second. Jim Hardy is his name, so I'll say all of that again next time on MezFi Meets. We'll have Jim Hardy, who is one of our investment committee members, a banker of 40 years, and a very interesting character. So I'm sure the conversation will be equally interesting, but different to today. And Mitch, thanks so much, mate, for coming on, and really look forward to catching up soon.